So this is the resistance report for day 510 since the October 7th operation, ceasefire day 40. I am reporting on the prisoner exchanges that happened on Saturday, February the 22nd, and today is the 27th of February. And as of today, there's now been 9 handovers of Israeli captives, seven sets of living captives totaling 25, and 2 sets of coffins of deceased Israelis totaling 33, and now 1,800 Palestinians have been released, and Israel's still holding up 200 more that were supposed to be released in total. So this is the end of phase 1 of the ceasefire. This is the last exchanges of the ceasefire, and that's what I'll be covering now. So let's take a look at the Gaza map. It's a good way to get our bearings. So there's been release ceremonies that have taken place from the northern most Gaza Strip, so the northern Jabalia refugee camp, just south of Beit Lahia, near Kamal Adwan Hospital. That's just south of Beit Lahia, right at the top of the map there. There's been 3 or 4 in Gaza City itself, one in the Gaza port. In the middle camps, Deir al-Bala had a release. Khan Yunis has had several. And I'm going to report right now on Rafah. And if we look at the next map, we get the zoom in on Rafah. And just to note that the Israelis have been violating this ceasefire throughout. Only 70% of the 600 aid trucks that were supposed to come in a day have reached Gaza. Only 10% of the 200,000 tents, which is in a very it's winter. It's winter. There was storms all week this week, and those tents are not coming in. There's supposed to be 200,000 of them. Only 10% have passed through, and no trailers that were supposed to go to civilians, 60,000. None of those have passed. Less than 15% of the 50 patients that are supposed to pass each day for medical care have been released through the Rafah crossing, which you can see down at the bottom of that map. That's where the exiting of the patients is happening. And there's been more than 350 Israeli security violations throughout this stage of the ceasefire. So the map that we're looking at there, you can see Tel al-Sultan. That is where Yahya Sinwar was killed in October. The Philadelphia corridor runs along the border with Egypt that you see there to the left of the map. Israel announced today that they are not going to leave the Philadelphia corridor, which is a further violation of the ceasefire. I don't, these are kind of these statements leading into stage 2. I'm not sure how valuable they are, because the stage 2 negotiations will include Israel leaving the Philadelphia corridor. So some of these statements are made for a domestic audience that the Israeli government wants to seem tough to. So this exchange that I'm going to start with is the Rafah Brigade. This was their first opportunity for an exchange. As I said, they've happened all over Gaza. This is Rafah's first. It happened in eastern Rafah. And if we take a look at video number 1 here, we can see the video report that Qassam released. So we're watching the shadow unit here, the guards for the prisoners. Shadow unit was set up in 2006 after the capture of Gilad Shalit, who was captured by the Rafah Brigade at Kerem Shalom. Again, you see a secured site, organized, no crowds. You see weapons, captured weapons on the stage there. I'll break down each of these components in still frames after we watch this video. Again, I'm leaving out the captives, not showing those because it's a violation of the Third Geneva Convention, and also because YouTube takes them down, although we know that the standards are different for Palestinians than they are for Israelis. So there you see shadow unit. That's the logo of the shadow unit of the trucks arriving. Those are the shadow unit guards meeting up with the Rafah Brigade here. And this is the same formalities that we've seen in all these exchanges. They go up, they meet with the Red Cross, they sign over an official papers. Here's the shadow unit meeting with the Rafah Brigade. and they hand over the prisoners. The prisoners were spoke from the stage briefly, but they're not coerced. They're not held in any way. They're not in handcuffs. They're not. They haven't been abused in any way, unlike Israeli prison service does to the Palestinians. Um, there's a lot of detail on this stage. This was the Rafah Brigade's first opportunity to communicate through these exchanges. You can see the paperwork being signed off here, something we've seen at every exchange. And this is the release of the captives that we've edited out. You can see in the destroyed buildings, we have people watching. People are fascinated by this process. Of course, it's been 500 days of their lives totally absorbed in this entire situation. So there's a certain fascination with the release of these captives. If we go to number 2 here, we can look at the stage in detail. On the left there, you see Mohammed al-Deif, the commander of the Qassam Brigades, who was assassinated in July. Below him there, you see Rayad al-Attar. He is the Rafah Brigade commander that was assassinated in 2014. He led the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐿 operation, which was a tunnel operation at Kerem Shalom in Rafah on the border with Israel. I mean, it's not a border, it's a fence in a ghetto. But that operation tunneled underneath the wall and came up and captured the Israeli tank gunner 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐿, and brought him back into Gaza. So Rayad al-Attar there is on the left. On the right is Mohammed Abu Shmala. He was the Eastern battalion commander in the Rafah Brigades. He was also assassinated along with Rayad al-Attar in 2014 while they were negotiating the ceasefire during the 2014 war. And underneath, you can see Mahmoud Hamdan, he is the Tel Sultan battalion commander who was killed with Yahya Sinwar, and a couple lesser known commanders. Abdullah al-Hur, he is a chief of the Rafah Reserve Brigade, and Sobi Abu Shara, who is the leader of the Weapons and Services Unit of the Rafah Battalion, of the Rafah Brigade. So you can see we've seen this at each of these, the martyrs, local martyrs shown on the stage. If you look along the bottom skirt there, we have the quote from Yahya Sinwar that he gave that I've interpreted from the poem of Ahmed Shawki poem, that in front of true freedom is a closed door, pushed a little more open by every hand bloodied in the struggle. And then you can see on that skirt of the stage, there's 7 operations that you can see along there. I'm going to show you each of those 7 operations. But on the upper right of the stage, you can see Mohammed al-Deif, and he's saying that we can change the course of history. And that quote comes from the Al Jazeera documentary that had Mohammed al-Deif speaking before the October 7th operation, commanding the operation. And that's one of the things he said about October 7th while planning the operation. So they've memorialized that on the right-hand side of the stage, facing the stage. And then on the back splash of the stage, you can see operations. The one on the left is from October 7th. The soldier that you see won over, he was captured in 2014 during the 2014 war in Rafah. We see the HJ-8 anti-tank guided missile system, which was Rafah. Rafah used that system. We'll show you that coming up, but they memorialized that. And an exploding tank. In the air, you see hang gliders that were synonymous with October 7th operation. And then you see the ubiquitous helicopter medevac, the medevac helicopters that were a key part of Qassam's videos throughout the war, showing the medical evacuation of soldiers targeted in these operations. So it was an interesting thing because you see on the skirt there on the bottom, you see those 7 operations. And throughout this war, I've been showing you almost all of their operations and picking out the notable ones. But this is the first time that we've heard from the brigade themselves which ones they thought were notable. And so you can see those along the bottom. I put those all together here for you in a little Rafah Brigade mixtape. If we want to go to number 3, you can see these operations that they had on the wall. So this is a tunnel operation with a shawad, explosively formed penetrator. You're going to watch this soldier. I showed you this operation. I showed you all these operations during the war, but you see he places it at the optimal distance to the back door of the Merkava tank, where the weakest point, other than the turret gap, is, and he dives back down into the tunnel, and he's underground. Here is the one where the two fighters used guerrilla action devices and ran up and hand placed them underneath the tank turret there, and you watch that is the weakest spot on the tank, and they put two of them in there, destroying that tank. That first operation, what the tunnel operation, was the 21st of May. It was like just less than 2 weeks into the actual battle, and the first week of the battle in Rafah. Here we see a Namur troop carrier, and you're going to watch this one. The troop carrier has two soldiers riding outside the hatch. The commanders are riding outside the hatch, and you see they stop because they see an ambush set up, and they reverse, and they're trying to reverse out of the ambush when they're hit with a Yasin, while both of those soldiers were outside of the tank. So that was obviously a well-planned ambush, since they have the cameraman in the exact position to cover that operation. That's the HJ-8 that I talked about, and hitting a Namur troop carrier there, and now it's burning. This is the only time we saw this weapon used in Gaza, was used by the Rafah Brigade. And this is Hossam, the sniper from the Operation Avenging Sinwar series of operations. Edited out his sniper hits because YouTube doesn't allow those. But here comes another operation with a guerrilla action device hand delivered to this Namur troop carrier. So Rafah Brigade, they did a lot of hand delivered operations. There's a number more of operations that they could have chosen from. It's interesting to see these are the 7 that they think are the ones that they wanted to represent them on the stage, which is something notable, because we don't hear from them directly. We just hear from them through through the videos. And this is the one where they destroyed this Namur troop carrier, and there's no audio on this one, but the fighter is so excited about hitting this, and he yells out, "They are the killers of women and children," as that Namur blows up. And a lot of times you see Israel's people saying that the tanks, that the Yassins don't do anything. You can see from this one that is absolutely not true. And so that was a notable operation and a success. And you can see it there burning afterwards, still burning. The cameraman's able to get right in there and see that shot. So those are the best of from the skirt of the stage that the Rafah Brigade wanted us to see. If we look at number 4, we got more captured weapons. And this is interesting because, so these are Israel Weapon Industries Tavor X95 bullpup rifles that we've been seeing fighters carrying that were captured. A lot of them were captured on October 7th, but this is the first time that one of the brigades has said that these weapons were captured in Gaza during battles. So the Rafah Brigade made that point, that these were pointedly captured during battles in Rafah. And you can see the M16 and M4 variants that Israel uses. So these are, and you can clearly see their battle-worn rifles, so captured in the course of battle. And this still photo is of the soldier setting up the weapons on the stage here, but he's going to go back and hang dog tags from the soldiers that they captured the weapons from. So pretty remarkable series of the Rafah Brigade really did it up in this one. If we look at number 5, they also brought out their archers. They brought out the Yassin teams. You see about a dozen of them there. You can see some that are brand new, some that are battle worn. You can see the thermobaric warhead on the far right of your screen there, the beige one. And this is the most any brigade has brought out of their archer team. So the Rafah Brigade did that in force. Number 6 is the same thing, just a different angle of them. You can see them all here. There's even more here. This is about 24 of them. You can see the first one closest to you is in pristine shape, and as you work down, you can see the battle-used ones. The beige ones are the thermobaric warheads, and those I've described to you many times during operations, but you get a good shot of them there, a good look of them there. And as I've told you, over these 15 months. The thermobaric is unique to Gaza. The tandem charge thermobaric is unique to Gaza. They built the thermobaric inside the casing of the tandem Soviet PG-7VR. So that's unique to Gaza. I just like to point that out for people. And one more silhouette of them here, because we always saw them firing. We often saw it from the perspective of the launcher, so that was a good opportunity to see the Yasin in its form. And of course, the Yasin was the linchpin of the defense of Gaza. So the fact that they had these out in the ceremony, I think, was really significant. So that was the Rafah Brigade. On the same day, about an hour and a half later, the Central Brigade was able to carry out their first. That they had one previous release in Dar al Bala, so this is their second release. But this was in the Nusrat camp that you see there, just south of the Netzarim corridor. So the Nusrat battalion, they were fighting the building of the corridor, as well as the Magazi Battalion. They were fighting the creation of the corridor along with the Barrage Battalion. So the Central Brigade is the Nusrat Battalion, the Barrage Battalion, Magazi Battalion, and Dar al-Bala Battalion. And of course, the Central Camps has many key leaders from the 𝐶assam Brigades, both living in this generation and from previous. Adnan al-Ghul, who the sniper rifle is named after and is the father of the 𝐶assam weapons industry. He's from al-Magazi camp. And Ayman Nofel was the Central Brigade commander. He was assassinated earlier in the war. And Marwan Issa, he was killed in March. He was assassinated in March, and he was the number 2 and really the operational chief of the 𝐶assam Brigades, the number 2 to Muhammad al-Daif. And his role, Marwan Issa's role from the Central Brigades, informing the professionalization of the 𝐶assam Brigades, is going to be something that history will reflect well on him for professionalizing and creating. Adnan al-Ghul's goal was to get weapons in the hands of the fighters and have that to proliferate. And Marwan Issa and Ahmed Jabari were part of were at the driving force to professionalize and create an army, a national army out of the 𝐶assam Brigade. So all of that in the Central Camp's history. So let's look at number 10. Sorry, this is their video that they released of the exchange. And here you see a real nationalistic event. You can see fighters from all factions are taking part in this event. You have marching here in formation. You'll note the headbands. They're all wearing the same uniform. They're wearing a national uniform. But each faction of the Joint Operations Room is present there in this handover, which was other factions have been present in other events, but this was the most formalized one, and it was a real statement to the Joint Operations Room that we've been covering throughout the war. And you see here they put up the Palestinian flag, so real national army vibes coming out of this, and that's them all across the stage there. I'll break down who was all there when we go to the still pictures, but again, a well-organized event. These are not the way that the Israelis describe them. So, and Marwan Issa's son was there, and Marwan Issa's son was carrying a sign that says, "This land grows resistance fighters just as it grows olive trees," which was a statement from Abu Ubaidah earlier in the war. So Yeah, this is them marching in formation. Of course, you have the Qassam brigades are the head of the Joint Operations Room. Saraya al-Quds, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Abu Ali Mustafa brigades, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine's National Resistance brigades. The Popular Resistance Committees were there in that line. They have the Nasser Salahdin brigades, and there's multiple brigades of multiple battalions of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades, the Mujahideen brigades, and the Ansar brigades are all in there marching in formation, really underscoring the Joint Operations Room. We can look at the next slide too, that just shows more of that. You can see them all on the stage there, the 10 different factions that we've been reporting on throughout the war. And underneath the stage on the skirt there, in Hebrew, as a message just to the Israelis, that's Netanyahu's quote that he said, "Military pressure is the only way to return the captives." So they're highlighting that that is incorrect because the captives were not returned through violence on that stage. And one more of the joint operations in the close-up there, you can see them, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, Al-Amudi Battalion. You can see the DFLP there, Saraya, Mujahideen Brigades, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, and Qassam in that, and the Abu Ali Mustafa Brigades are there too in the second from the right. So joint operations, interesting statement made by the Nusrat release. Number 15 shows the successes of the military operations. This is that sign says the hell of Magazi made by our hands, and blessed was our aim. Magazi Battalion carried out the operation that killed 21 Israeli soldiers, the largest toll that Israel admitted to of the war. And the operation was a multi-stage operation where a Yassin archer fired on an Israeli position that was full of anti-tank mines that Israel was using to demolish houses along the Netzarim corridor in order to build the Netzarim corridor. And the Qassam Brigade's Magazi Battalion got a series of IEDs, a minefield into the area where these soldiers were staying in a house that was stacked with anti-tank mines, and they triggered the explosion of the building. We can look at that operation next. I queued that up with number 16. So it's the same archer. It's you guys probably remember me breaking down this operation. He fires on the house, then he comes around, reloads with another Yassin here and fires on the Merkava tank. He dives back down into the tunnel, and down in the tunnel, the guys hear the building explode. And that was something that the Israelis had to admit to because it was a massive cloud of smoke, and it was one of those difficult security situations that Israel talked about when things went wrong. So that's the central brigade pointing to their most successful operations, and that's the operation that you saw right there. And then number 17, this sentiment was in many of the last exchanges. The sticker on says, "We'll force you to forget about your plans, like forget about your objectives. We forced you to make your military objectives fail. And we don't forgive either." And this is a reference to the Israelis who dressed up the prisoners who were being released in threatening shirts that said, "We will not forgive, we will not forget," with Star of David's on them. They handcuffed the prisoners and made them put their heads down with their handcuffs behind their back and the Star of David on their back that said, "We will not forgive, we will not forget." And they gave them wristbands that had further threats about how they would hunt them down after they were released. And so this guy's got a sticker on his Yassin referring to that, but also the Israel Prison Service found slogans carved on the walls of Palestinian prisoners' cells before their release, because this started 2 weeks ago, Israel giving these threatening shirts. And in the cells, the Palestinian prisoners about to be released said, "We will not forget, we will not forgive, and we will not kneel." Slogans written by prisoners inside Israeli prisons. So again, communication inside and outside the prisons, communications to Gaza, communications to the Palestinians writ large, and communication to the Israelis. So this is what we've seen all along in these ceremonies that you might have heard in the Western media were called grotesque. They really aren't. They're pointed messaging events that are there's a lot to break down in these. So that was the Central Brigade's opportunity. And then I just want to show you the 𝐄𝐿 one. This was on a Thursday, 1 week ago today. And this was the handover of the Bibas family and one other captive who was killed by Israeli bombs. And this ceremony was called grotesque in the Western media as well. And what we're seeing is um, the fighters carrying coffins and putting them up on a stand to be passed dignified into a Red Crescent vehicle. You can see the fighters walking in formation here, carrying. It's far from grotesque. It's actually a very dignified way of handling this situation where this family was blown to pieces by American and Israeli bombs. And the juxtaposition between this funeral ceremony for these Israelis compared to the ceremonies that Palestinians experience, where they're buried in alleyways or the median of a road, or all the kind of shocking non-burials that happened in Gaza. I just wanted to point this out. We can look at the next slide too, because you really can see it in the next slide. They had a black curtain covering over the coffins. So the stage had a black curtain, and then they revealed the coffins behind the curtain. So they weren't even displaying the coffins. So this seemed very dignified to me and didn't match. I mean, the Israelis expect that you're not going to know what they're talking um, about these ceremonies. But this ceremony here was the reason why Israel postponed releasing the prisoners. They really bucked at this one, and at the one in Nusrat, where the shadow unit brought two prisoners who were not being released, who were with their friends, soldiers. The Nusrat release was 3 soldiers, and they brought 2 other soldiers along and didn't release them and had them on camera telling Netanyahu, like, don't forget about us, move on to stage 2. But when Netanyahu talks about the humiliation of these ceremonies, he's not talking about the prisoners. He's talking about all these messages that I'm breaking down for you here that are highlighting all of Israel's military failures and failures of the objectives of their operations. So, and then there's just one more here that I wanted to show you, because this is about the Bibas family. It's about the civilian family. And so the messaging on this one was very clear. 11,000 injured, it says this is that sign says Zionism in numbers. 111,000 injured, 9,268 massacres, and then these focus on families because the Bibas were a family. 4,889 families with only one family member left. 2,092 family names completely wiped off the civil registry. 17,881 kids killed. 12,316 women. 38,000 kids lost one parent. 17,000 kids in Gaza lost both their parents. So again, they use this messaging for a little bit of perspective on the situation with the Bibases. And the final point I want to make is the national campaign to recover the bodies of martyrs released a statement that says the occupation the Israelis continue to detain 665 bodies of martyrs in the numbered cemeteries and refrigerators, some of them since the 1960s and 70s. The last of them was a martyr from Al-Farah camp yesterday. And so these bodies are not returned. They're held by Israel along with the more than 1,500 martyrs, the 1,500 prisoners that were released in this exchange. So while Israel's complaining about the way that these dignified coffins were passed over to the Red Cross, Israel is still holding 665 Palestinian bodies. So that is prisoner exchange 7. It's the final one of phase 1. 1,781 Palestinians have been released, 275 life sentences, 295 long sentences, 70 women and children. And the rest are from Gaza, 1,000 from Gaza, plus 200 women and children that should be released in the coming days. There are now, according to Israel, there's 59 now remaining. And so there's somewhere between 24 and 30 of them thought to be alive in Gaza. And that is what the stage 2 negotiations will be about. So that is the resistance report for this week. We will continue to follow the ceasefire going forward. But that's the report for this week.